August 9th, 1944, Camp Aliceville, Alabama. SS Lieutenant Eric Summer stepped into the wooden barracks that doubled as a theater. The air inside was thick, pine dust, diesel, sweat. 100 German POWs sat in silence, all facing the makeshift screen. The projector clicked to life behind them. Summer smirked. "Hollywood," he muttered in German. "America's poison with a soundtrack." The first scene. A wounded black American soldier shielding a child from gunfire. No speeches. Just breath. Just blood. No one laughed, not even Summer. He didn't know yet. This wasn't just a film. It was a mirror. And in 17 minutes, he'd see himself, and everything he believed, shatter. The Alabama heat clung to everything: shirts, breath, thoughts. Camp Aliceville was bigger than most German towns. Wooden barracks stretched across dusty fields like railroad cars, each filled with men who once thought they'd be marching through Moscow by now. Lieutenant Eric Summer had arrived 3 weeks earlier, wrists still bruised from the cuffs. He hadn't spoken to a guard since. He didn't need to. He observed, listened, calculated. It was his instinct, the same one that kept him alive on the Eastern Front. The same instinct that told him almost immediately, this isn't a prison, it's something else. There were no dogs, no shouting, no gun butts to the ribs. Instead, hot meals, clean sheets, letters from home, a chessboard, and a library stocked better than some schools back in Leipzig. And now, movies. Summer heard the announcement while waiting in line for bread. Friday, 1900 hours, feature film screening, The Oxbow Incident. A few men chuckled, one spat, another muttered, American fairy tales. But most were silent. Back in the barracks, a discussion started. First quiet, then louder. Was it propaganda, a trap, a way to shame them, or worse, to humanize themselves? Summer didn't speak. He didn't need to. He knew already this was strategic. In Berlin, he'd worked with cultural officers. He knew what soft power looked like, how music, food, and stories were deployed not for joy, but for disarmament. Hollywood is just another weapon, he'd once written, the most seductive kind. And still, that night he showed up. The projector had been set up in an old mess hall. 2 American guards leaned against the back wall, unarmed, chewing gum like bored schoolboys. Overhead, a fan spun slowly, slicing the heat without mercy. Summer took a seat near the front, not to enjoy it, to dissect it. He expected gloss, heroism, a sermon. But what he saw was a desert, a mob, a man begging for justice, another praying he wasn't wrong, and then a rope. No hero came, no music swelled, no righteousness, just faces, silent, guilty. When the film ended, no one clapped, no one moved. The lights came back on, the heat returned, but something cold lingered in the room. Summer stood, but he didn't walk out. For a full minute, he just looked at the screen, now blank, and wondered why anyone would show that to the enemy. That night, in his journal, he wrote only one line. They let us see them. In Germany, the enemy was never shown, only distorted. Always monstrous, never conflicted. The English were cowards. The French were insects. The Americans, animals with money. But this was not an animal. This was a mirror. Over the next few days, the mood in the camp shifted. Not with chaos, not with rebellion. With silence. Conversations dulled. Jokes fell flat. Even the guards seemed unsure, like they'd handed over something too sharp. In the showers, a corporal asked Summer, "Did you see the man with the rope? He looked like my cousin." Summer didn't answer, because he had thought the same thing. He thought of that day in Poland, the farmer, the mistake, the shot. No trial, no question, just orders. He had forgotten the farmer's face. The film reminded him. But this wasn't guilt. Not yet. This was discomfort. The kind that creeps in when belief begins to loosen but hasn't yet broken. He found himself watching the guards more closely. They smiled too easily, laughed with each other. One had a drawing from his daughter pinned inside the watch station. It made no sense. They were supposed to be barbarians in uniform, but they cried in the movies. Let prisoners read. Let them sing. One night, an American handed Summer a copy of Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men. "You read English, right?" the guard asked. Summer nodded, slowly. He took the book, didn't open it. Not yet. But he didn't return it either. And that was enough. The world inside the camp was still made of fences, still guarded, still war. But something had shifted. Not in the air. In the minds of men like Summer, who for the first time saw cracks forming in the steel belief they carried from Europe. And though he wouldn't say it aloud, a single thought gnawed at the edge of everything he knew. If they are not what we were told, then what does that make us? The projector was still there, tucked beneath a gray tarp in the corner of the mess hall, like a body someone forgot to bury. No one mentioned it. No one touched it. But every man who passed that corner walked a little quicker. It had been 6 days since the film. Summer woke before roll call. The camp sounded different, not quieter, he knew quiet, but slower, like something underneath the routine had shifted. At breakfast, Meissner sat beside him, eyes hollow. He pushed beans around his tray and muttered, "I had a dream again." Summer didn't look up. "Don't start." But Meissner didn't stop. Same dream. The rope. But this time, I was holding it. Summer wiped his mouth, stood and left. Outside, the wind was warmer than usual. Dust blew in patterns across the yard. He spotted a guard reading the Stars and Stripes behind the fence, not hiding it, reading it in full view. Summer could see the headline, "Senators Press Pentagon on Civilian Casualties in Italy." Summer stared for a second too long. The guard looked up, nodded once. Summer turned away. Inside Barracks 9, someone had taken down the portrait of Hitler that once hung over the stove. In its place, a blank space, yellowed from smoke. That night, the rain came hard. It beat against the tin roof like artillery. Some men stayed awake, staring at nothing. Others mumbled prayers they hadn't spoken in years. In the dark, Sergeant Holtz whispered to no one in particular, "It's too quiet now, even in the noise." Summer sat up, said nothing. He could hear footsteps outside, not marching, just pacing. Boots with no destination. Someone was coughing. Someone else was crying, quietly, into their blanket. The next morning, a Red Cross parcel arrived late. One of the boxes was wet, torn open in the mud. Inside were American novels, translated. Stamped with approval. Summer picked one up. Of Mice and Men. He flipped to a page at random. "Tell me about the rabbits, George." He closed it. His hand stayed on the cover longer than it should have. He didn't understand the story, but something about it stayed with him. Later at roll call, the projector was gone. The tarp folded neatly, the corner swept clean. No explanation. But as the names were called, every man looked. Not forward, not at the guard, but toward that empty corner. Just for a second. Long enough to admit it had done something, even if no one dared say what. The heat didn't rise. It pressed, like something heavy had settled over Camp Aliceville, not in the sky, but beneath the skin. The schedule stayed the same. Roll call, breakfast, work detail, library. But something in the rhythm stuttered. Delays, pauses, unfinished sentences. Bread came late. 2 crates of potatoes never showed. The guards offered no explanation. They didn't have one, or didn't care to share. At mess, Summer counted cans. He'd done it for weeks now, quietly. There were fewer. He said nothing. Across the table, Meissner traced circles on his tray. If this were a front, we'd call it a soft siege. Summer looked at him. Meissner didn't smile. But we're not the ones encircling anything. That night, the power flickered once, then again. A bulb popped in Barrack 6. No one replaced it. The projector corner stayed empty, but someone had left a broom leaning against the wall, as if someone meant to clean but didn't. In the library, the Stars and Stripes carried a story about Detroit strikes, factories halting tank production. Another article mentioned a congressional inquiry into military waste. Summer read both twice. He felt no joy, only confusion. If America was this chaotic, why hadn't it broken? In the yard, the men moved slower, not weak, watchful. A few had stopped shaving, some polished boots with no orders. One man began writing letters backward from signature to greeting. Holtz, the mechanic, said, "We're still soldiers, but I don't know what army anymore." Meissner folded paper birds from cigarette wrappers. He gave one to Summer. "Folded wrong," he said. "Wings don't hold." It sat on Summer's bunk all night, crumpled by morning. The next day, a Red Cross parcel arrived, water damaged. Inside, novels, essays. A worn copy of The Grapes of Wrath with penciled notes in the margins. Summer flipped through. One line was circled 3 times. If you're in trouble or hurt or need, go to poor people. They're the only ones that'll help. He closed the book, slid it beneath his mattress. Outside, a supply truck stalled at the south gate. The engine coughed twice and died. 2 guards pushed while a third steered. They laughed as they struggled. One slipped in the mud and cursed. Another pulled him up without a word. No one yelled. No one barked orders. They just kept pushing. That evening, as the sun cut sharp across the barracks windows, the loudspeakers clicked on. Prisoners 217 and 403 relocation EO 500 hours. No reasons, no questions. Everyone heard it. No one spoke. Summer watched the shadow of the flagpole stretch across the dirt. For the first time, it pointed not east or west, but straight toward the empty projector corner. Back inside, someone had drawn a map of Europe in charcoal on the back wall. No arrows, no units, just borders and a circle around Berlin. Summer stared at it for a long time. The circle was smudged, as if someone had tried to erase it, or couldn't finish. He touched the edge of the mark. It came off on his finger, dark, soft. Behind him, Meissner said, "Maybe the war didn't change us." Summer turned. "Then what?" Meissner looked away. "Maybe it showed us we were already broken." The relocation happened at dawn. No sirens, no shouting, just boots on gravel, and the quiet rattle of chains that no one was actually wearing. 2 names, 2 men. They didn't resist. They didn't ask why. The guards loaded them into the truck with the same care they'd use for a crate of glass. One of the prisoners turned and nodded to Summer, not in farewell, but in understanding. Then the doors shut. The engine coughed, started, and the sound of it lingered long after the truck disappeared. At breakfast, the benches felt emptier than they should. Meissner didn't sit. Holtz didn't speak. The bread was dry. Summer ate in silence until he saw what replaced the missing faces. A folded piece of paper on the table. A drawing. Charcoal. The same map from the wall, but this time the circle around Berlin had been filled in completely. Black, dense, final. He turned it over. On the back, 3 words in German. "We were wrong." He froze. Outside, someone shouted, not in panic, but in command. A guard calling for assistance. Summer stepped out of the barracks just in time to see smoke rising from behind the supply depot. Not an attack, a fire. The guards were running toward it with buckets, shouting for water. One slipped, tore his knee open. Another, the same one who once mocked the Germans for marching too straight, stopped to carry him out. No hesitation, no order, just reflex. Summer stood still. His eyes flicked between the burning building and the men fighting the flames. Between chaos and coordination. Between cruelty and compassion. Something cracked, not loud, not visible, but deep. The smoke rolled through the yard, acrid and gray, and he tasted metal in his mouth. He didn't move until the fire was gone, until the air cleared, until he saw the guard with the bleeding knee light a cigarette, laugh, and hand one to the man who had saved him. For the first time, Summer didn't see enemies. He saw men, and that realization hurt more than defeat. The folder didn't look important. It sat between weather briefings and ration logs in the camp library, forgotten, frayed, nearly falling apart. Summer opened it because it was old, and he trusted age more than labels. Stamped on the cover, Confidential Allied Petroleum Operations, EU Command. He flipped it open. Inside were charts, tables, diagrams. No battle plans, no casualty reports. Just pipes. Operation Pluto, pipeline under the ocean. A direct line from southern England to the beaches of Normandy. From there, another system, Red Ball Express. Convoy schedules, refueling maps, daily delivery volumes. One line circled in pencil. 100,000 gallons per day, continuous flow. Summer sat down. He remembered the Eastern Front, frozen diesel, dead trucks, horses. Here there was no shortage, just strategy. He flipped to a photo. A woman in coveralls welding pipe. Behind her, a black soldier loading crates. The caption, "Every hour matters, every hand helps." Summer stared longer than necessary. Later, Meissner handed him a folded page from Stars and Stripes. Front page, Red Ball breaks 36-hour barrier. A photo beneath, convoys threading through bombed-out villages. Meissner didn't comment. Neither did Summer. That evening, letters appeared on the chapel door. Typed, clipped. From nurses, engineers, clerks. One read, "I bandaged a German boy today. His hand trembled in mine. I thought of my brother." Another, "We destroy bridges in the morning and rebuild schools in the afternoon. I don't know what to feel anymore." Summer read each one, slowly, twice. In Barracks 8, someone passed around a novel. No cover. Inside, underlined in pencil, there is a kind of victory in survival. Summer didn't know the author, but he copied the line. That night, rain fell hard. The kind that silences boots. Summer couldn't sleep. He walked to the library again, found a small clipping tucked in the back of the same folder. A quote from General Patton. "The fuel truck is more important than the tank." He laughed, once, quietly, then stopped. On the desk beside him, someone had left a photo. A German prisoner, blindfold removed, sitting in a field hospital, receiving soup from an American nurse. The caption read, "We treat the wound, not the uniform." Summer picked it up and held it, longer than he needed to, because for the first time he saw it wasn't about sides. It was about what came after. By the time the magnolia trees bloomed outside the fence, the war had already shifted inside their bones. Summer stopped marking days. The calendar above his bunk remained stuck on April 17th. No one corrected it. Time had become circular. News arrived, eyes darkened, silence spread, then it all repeated. It wasn't a single moment. It was erosion. The latest paper was pinned to the chapel door with a rusted nail. Dachau liberated. 30,000 freed. Mass graves discovered. Below it, a photo. Rows of corpses. Uniforms stripped. Eyelids open. Summer stood before it, not reading, just absorbing. Meissner joined him, holding another. "Buchenwald, ovens still warm, 21,000 found alive." They didn't speak. There was nothing left worth saying. At breakfast, even the guards had stopped pretending. One left a tray unfinished. Another sat with his back to the room. Holtz whispered, "We built walls to protect ourselves. But what were we protecting, really?" That afternoon, the projector returned. No fanfare, no guard stationed at the door. The reel played against the wall of the mess hall, unedited. No sound. Barbed wire, skeletons with breath, American soldiers gagging, and bulldozers pushing limbs. A boy held a tin cup. It was empty. His lips moved, but there was no sound. A guard stepped out halfway through, lit a cigarette with shaking hands, and didn't come back. Summer didn't move. He had spent years convincing himself that discipline could outpace doubt. But doubt had no speed, it had gravity. Later that evening in the library, he found a worn novel. "The Moon is Down," dog-eared, pages underlined by different hands. One sentence circled in charcoal. "The thought of freedom is stronger than the fear of death." He copied it slowly into his notebook. Back in the barracks, Holtz was scratching names into the wood with a nail. Cities, towns, and one word repeated. Missing. Meissner sat on his cot, reading a letter from home. It was blank on the second page. "I think my sister ran out of things to say," he whispered. Summer nodded, but said nothing. That night, someone lit a candle in the chapel. No sermon, no prayer, just light. Summer sat beneath it, opened his notebook. Wrote, "I used to serve a country. Now I serve the truth. One is louder, the other is heavier. He closed the book, didn't put it away. The next morning, new prisoners arrived. One wore a coat 2 sizes too large. Another had no shoes. A child, no older than 12, carried a scrap of cloth with a Star of David sewn into the corner. The guards said nothing. No threats, no orders. Only one stepped forward and offered the boy a blanket. Summer watched the boy flinch, then accept it. He stepped closer. "Where were you?" he asked in German. The boy didn't answer, just looked down at his own feet. Later that day, Summer pinned the medic's photo, the one of the American kneeling beside a German POW, to the bulletin board outside the mess. Beneath it, he added his own note. "This is what survived." He stood back. No one removed it. No one dared. That evening, a harmonica played somewhere past the fence. Off-key, stumbling, but honest. The sky turned gray, then gold. Summer stood outside his barracks and watched the wind move through the trees. He didn't see himself in uniform anymore. He didn't see flags. He saw hands, holding books, holding blankets, holding each other. And in that moment, he understood. This war was never about conquest. It was about conscience. And conscience had finally won. The crates arrived unannounced. 3 of them, wooden, clean, stenciled in black. Library materials, U.S. War Department, educational distribution. The guards rolled them into the chapel, left without a word. Summer stood beside Holtz as they pried them open. Books, pamphlets, periodicals, newspapers, even films, reels wrapped in wax cloth. Meissner picked up a thick binder. Quartermaster General Report, 1944. He laughed once, not out of humor, but disbelief. Inside, charts, graphs, color-coded supply maps. A page titled Global Ration Flow listed how American soldiers, allies, and even Axis prisoners were fed. 11.2 million POW rations delivered across 6 continents. Another page detailed socks, just socks. Standard issue, 3 pairs, replaced bi-weekly, total issued, 128 million. Summer turned to a fold-out diagram. A warehouse in Kansas. The building covered 3 city blocks. No wonder they didn't need more men, Meissner muttered. In the next crate, someone found a booklet. Operation Red Ball Express. Black and white photos showed endless convoys. Mud, snow, dust. 900 trucks per day. 24-hour cycle. Priority, fuel, food, bridge material. A diagram highlighted fuel depots constructed in under 72 hours. Holtz held up a magazine, Fortune, March 1945. On the cover, Ford's Willow Run plant. 1 bomber every 63 minutes, 24 hours a day. The numbers felt fictional, but they weren't. Summer opened a film canister. The reels smelled of chemicals and metal. The title etched on the side, Why We Fight, Episode 5, The Battle of the Machines. They didn't have a projector, but they didn't need one. The photos were enough. Detroit, Pittsburgh, Birmingham. Cities turned into supply chains. Civilians building tanks between coffee breaks. Inside one pamphlet, he found a quote. "This war will be won not by the bravest, but by the best supplied. General Brecken Somerville." Summer sat down on the chapel floor. His knees felt heavier than his body. He stared at the numbers again. Steel tonnage, tire manufacturing, bridge building kits, mobile bakeries. "Mobile bakeries?" Meissner said, half whispering. "They fed armies with moving ovens?" Summer nodded. There was a silence. Not from shock. From comprehension. This wasn't just war. It was logistics, faith, and momentum turned into a weapon. A system so big it didn't need to hate you to defeat you. It simply needed to outlast you. Holtz whispered, "We brought ideology. They brought infrastructure." Summer traced the pipeline map with his finger. It stretched like a vein across Europe. Then he said quietly, "We were not fighting an army. We were fighting a civilization." The projector flickered before the image settled. A crackle, then black and white frames. No soundtrack, just the hum of the reel. Summer sat in the 3rd row, elbows on knees, Holtz to his left, Meissner on the aisle. No one spoke. The first frame read, "A nation at work. Steelworks, Ford plants, rail yards with endless lines of cargo. A woman tightening bolts on a B-24 wing. Voiceover. In America, war is a job, everyone shows up. Cut 2, children collecting tin. Women counting calories on ration charts. Barbers offering free haircuts for draftees. A man in overalls signs off a checklist of outgoing tanks. He waves to his daughter, watching from the gate. Then, a town parade for a retiring machinist. He holds up a plaque. The crowd cheers. His wife cries. Summer stared. The next segment showed posters hung across factory towns. Democracy needs maintenance. Lunch break ends tyranny faster. Keep it running for everyone. Laughter in the audience. One man smirked, but it didn't last. The second reel began. Jazz, New Orleans, couples dancing, black and white, laughing. A woman behind a typewriter, a boy polishing shoes. A teacher drawing a ballot box on the chalkboard. Caption: You don't wait to be free, you learn to use freedom daily. A mailman saluted a trash collector. They both smiled. Holtz's arms dropped, nodding, no longer crossed. Third reel. Protests. Unions. Voting booths under rain. Churches used as shelters. A quote on screen. Citizenship means disagreement. Summer's brow furrowed. Then, American soldiers in Naples rebuilding a bakery. A German girl eating a roll. Smiling. Meissner leaned in. They filmed this? Summer nodded. They want us to know. Next scene, American GIs helping French villagers plant potatoes. A field reborn. Caption: Occupation is not punishment, it is repair. A final reel. Soldiers planting trees where bombs had fallen. A nurse placing flowers on a grave. No words. Gospel humming under final shot. Freedom isn't what you take, it's what you leave behind. Silence. The room stayed seated long after the reel ticked empty. No one moved, not even the guards. Summer walked outside. The night air was clean, the yard still. He sat beneath the chapel steps, pamphlet in hand. Its title read, Democracy, a System That Trains Itself. Inside, underlined, We outlast our enemies because we outquestion ourselves. He flipped the page. Another line scribbled in pencil. Truth survives in those who dare to doubt. Meissner joined him. He handed over a torn magazine page. A woman, black smiling, welding a tank. Caption: Rosie too. Holtz walked past, quietly. He looked once at the picture, then kept walking. Summer stared at the image, his voice low, measured. We trained men to die for orders. Pause. They trained theirs to live for questions. The chapel had no sermon that day, only paper. Stacks of it, spread across the table like scattered weapons, except these couldn't be fired, only read. Each page laid flat in the sun, slicing through broken shutters. Summer sat alone at first, then Holtz joined, then Meissner. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Summer pointed to the top sheet. United States Aircraft Production 1944 960318. Meissner read the subline. That's 264 planes per day, one every 5.4 minutes. Summer turned the page. Tanks, 234 units. Artillery pieces, 318,000. Rifles, over 8 million. Holtz picked up a report labeled Food Logistics, Allied Forces. 6 million field rations per day, 1 million for troops not in combat. He blinked. Even those resting ate like machines. Next report, Naval. Liberty ships, one every 4.5 days. 2,710 total launched. Summer added quietly, They made ships like we made speeches. The room stayed silent. Meissner unfolded a magazine clipping, a factory floor. Women with gloves, men with goggles, children loading scrap rubber into barrels. Caption: Everyone fights, everyone works. Then another. B-24 bomber every 63 minutes, Willow Run plant. The numbers weren't slogans. They were timelines. Summer passed around a page marked Operation Pluto. 1 million gallons of fuel per day delivered under the English Channel. Red Ball Express, 5,958 trucks, 75% African-American drivers. Footnote: Average breakdown recovery, 6 hours. Holtz muttered, They didn't even need us to fail. They just needed us to wait. Summer nodded. They didn't conquer us. They outlasted us. Another paper showed votes cast in war factories. women running unions, workers chalking grievances on walls beside punch cards. Then came the quietest page. It's a logistics memo on POWs. 11.5 million meals delivered to Axis prisoners, per Geneva Convention. Maintained during Allied food shortages. No note of morality, just policy. Process. They fed the enemy because the manual said so. That broke something deeper. Summer leaned back, exhaled. He remembered speeches, flags, uniform inspections, the weight of belief. And then he remembered Alabama. Soap, jazz. A bench repaired without order. Meissner spoke. We built fear. They built furniture. Outside, a train horn echoed. Supply chain. No glory. Just motion. Holtz flipped the last page. At the bottom, typed in smaller font. You cannot stop a machine that believes in itself more than its operators do. Memo, German General Staff, May 1945. Summer stood, walked to the chapel lectern. He opened his notebook, tore out the page where he once listed every order he'd followed, burned it in the candle, then wrote, We didn't lose when we ran out of bullets. We lost when we couldn't build the world we claimed to fight for. He paused, then added, They didn't win because they believed more. They won because they built a world worth believing in. He left it on the wood. Outside, the air smelled of fuel and pine. Meissner and Holtz sat on the grass, watching a cargo truck unload grain. Not guarded, just parked. No one approached it. No one stole from it. It would be there in the morning. Summer joined them. Holtz asked, What do we do now? Summer replied, Start with what they left behind. He picked up a nail someone had dropped and held it up. Because this, he said, built more than any speech ever did. They didn't nod or speak. They just watched the horizon. Not for escape. For something worth carrying. The benches creaked. Wind moved through the trees. A train passed again in the distance. Steady, unstoppable, alive. And somewhere deep in the yard, a door remained open. Not from neglect, from intention. The list was posted just after dawn. Typed, neatly tacked to the chapel door. A guard walked the yard calling names, no urgency, no bark. Repatriation, Group 11, assemble for briefing. Summer stood, Holtz behind him. Meissner folded his blanket once, then twice. They dressed with care. Not formality, just dignity. No one ran, no one asked where. They already knew, not home, not yet. Just forward. Inside the mess hall, chairs were arranged. Not like soldiers. Like citizens. A lieutenant read instructions. The voice was clear, practiced, almost respectful. Each man received a stamped form. Cultural reintegration questionnaire. Holtz frowned. They want to know what we believe? No, Summer said. They want to know what survived. Afterward, they returned to the barracks. Packed their things. Summer opened his notebook one last time. He tore out the first page. The old page. The one with the list of rules. Burned it in the stove. Between the newer pages, he placed a nail, a ration card, a folded quote. You don't beat tyranny by mimicking it, you outgrow it. That evening, the sky turned soft. The benches near the chapel had been wiped clean. Someone, no one knew who, had planted flowers beneath the window. They hadn't bloomed, but they were there. Summer sat first. Meissner joined with a crate, soap, a pencil, a mirror. Tools. Holtz came last. In his hand, the nail Summer once picked up. He placed it gently on the bench. None of them spoke. A freight train rumbled far off, moving steady through the trees. It didn't feel like departure. It felt like continuity. Summer watched the tree line, then the sky. He didn't think of war. He thought of construction. He thought of things that lasted not because they conquered, but because they could be repaired. Dawn broke across the fence, clean and unannounced. And for once, none of them looked outward. They looked up.